How Arjuna accepted this Bhagavad Gita should be noted. His manner of acceptance is given in the 10th chapter, texts 12 to 14. This is very, very important contribution of Prabhupada to the studies of Bhagavad Gita. There have been plenty of articles which have been written on Bhagavad Gita since almost 100 years or more than that, analyzing different aspects. Academic scholars, traditional scholars, semi-academic scholars, all kinds of articles have been written. But this is a very, very important point which the vast majority of them seem to have ignored. How Arjuna understood the Bhagavad Gita. Because from a certain point onwards, Lord Krishna begins to approve of Arjuna's statements. So that itself is a clear indication that Arjuna's understanding is the correct understanding. Arjuna vache param brahma param dhama pavitram paramam bhavan purusham shashvatam divyam adidevam ajam vidhum ahustvam rishayas sarve devashir naradas tatha asito devalo vyasas swayam chaiva bravishim me sarvametat ritam manye yanmam vadasi keshava nahi te bhagavan vyaktim vidur deva na danava. Arjuna said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala and Vyasa confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me. O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality. After hearing Bhagavad Gita from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna accepted Krishna as Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahman. Every living being is Brahman. But the Supreme Living Being, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the Supreme Brahman. So Arjuna doesn't just say, you are Brahman. He says, you are Param Brahma. Param Brahma. You are the Supreme Brahman. He distinguishes. Param Dhama means that he is the supreme rest or abode of everything. Pavitram means that he is pure, untainted by material contamination. Purusham means that he is the supreme enjoyer. Shashvatam, original. Divyam, transcendental. Adidevam, the supreme personality of Godhead. Ajam, the unborn. And Vibhum, the greatest. Now one may think that because Krishna was the friend of Arjuna, Arjuna was telling him all this by way of flattery. But Arjuna, just to drive out this kind of doubt from the minds of the readers of Bhagavad Gita, substantiates these praises in the next verse when he says that Krishna is accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not only by himself, but by authorities like Narada, Sita, Devala and Vyasadeva. Now, this is an important concept. Arjuna points out that his conception is identical with the conceptions of Narada, Sita, Devala and Vyasadeva. So here is another hint. One can examine the teachings of Narada, Sita, Devala, Vyasa to find out if they are impersonalists or they are personalists, whether they actually accept Krishna or Lord Vishnu as the highest authority or not. These are great personalities who distribute the Vedic knowledge as it is accepted by all acharyas. Therefore, Arjuna tells Krishna that he accepts whatever he says to be completely perfect. Sarvametad ritam manye. I accept everything you say to be true. Arjuna also says that the personality of the Lord is very difficult to understand, and that he cannot be known even by the great demigods. This means that the Lord cannot even be known by personalities greater than human beings. So how can a human being understand Lord Shri Krishna without becoming his devotee? Prabhupada adds this, without becoming his devotee, because he has already stated that Arjuna was selected by Lord Krishna to understand the teachings of Bhagavad Gita because he was his devotee and friend. So from that we understand that that is the qualification. Here Arjuna states what are the disqualifications. The disqualifications are um, being in any uh, uh, being in a species of life which is superior to that of the human beings. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita should be taken up in a spirit of devotion. One should not think that he is equal to Krishna, nor should he think that Krishna is an ordinary personality or even a very great personality. Lord Shri Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So the spirit of devotion is that we understand that we are not equal to Krishna and we can never ever become equal to Krishna, and that Krishna is not an ordinary personality or even a very great personality. He is Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan, and so on, as understood by Narada, Vyasadeva, and so on. So according to the statements of Bhagavad Gita or the statements of Arjuna, the person who is trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita, we should at least theoretically accept Sri Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. And with that submissive spirit, we can understand the Bhagavad Gita. Unless one reads the Bhagavad Gita in a submissive spirit, it is very difficult to understand Bhagavad Gita because it is a great mystery. That it is a mystery was already stated by the Supreme Lord earlier. Rahasyam Chetaduttamam. Just what is the Bhagavad Gita? From this point onwards, Prabhupada begins to reflect uh, the teachings of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan as presented in his introduction to Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to deliver mankind from the nescence of material existence. Every man is in difficulty in so many ways, as Arjuna also was in difficulty in having to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna surrendered unto Sri Krishna, and consequently this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Not only Arjuna, but every one of us is full of anxieties because of this material existence. Our very existence is in the atmosphere of non-existence. Actually, we are not meant to be threatened by non-existence. Our existence is eternal, but somehow or other we are put into asat. Asat refers to that which does not exist. In other words, we are actually eternal. In our original spiritual personal identities, we are eternal personalities. But because we have turned away from Krishna, we are placed within material existence. In material existence, every living entity is forcibly made to experience reincarnation according to the laws of karma. So in every particular body that we are placed in, every particular material body that we are placed in, we are made to identify with that material body, and certainly that material body is going to be destroyed. Uh, and because we think that we are those material bodies, and certainly those material bodies are going to be destroyed. Anything that takes birth comes with an expiry date. Then we are threatened, we are terrified. Oh, that is going to go away, that is going to be destroyed. I will be destroyed. Actually, we are made to think like this. Maya makes us think like this. It is not that if I start thinking that I am not this body, then automatically all my problems will disappear. It is not like that, because there's a third party involved who is psychologically imposing uh, the conception that we are our bodies. Until that agent stops her work on a particular individual, that individual will continue to uh, maintain the conception that he is his particular material body in which he is currently residing in. So in this way, we are threatened by non-existence. We are threatened by death. Out of so many human beings who are suffering, There are a few who are actually inquiring about their position as to what they are, why they are put into this awkward position, and so on. So this is a very awkward position that um, everyone has to experience, and everyone has to experience that which is undesirable. Our cherished desires are not fulfilled to the fullest extent, and we are made to experience various undesirable uh, events. So this is a very awkward position. Uh, Amongst the various personalities who are suffering, human beings are a few. Amongst them, there are a few who inquire about what they are, why they are put into this awkward position, and so on. Kim idam vishvam, koham kim idam vishvam, anayor dhruvam katham, atmanam nivritto jiva pritchati jnana siddhaya. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins this Tattva Viveka with this. Who am I? What is this world? What is my relationship with this world? One who is philosophically introspective will ask these questions in order to understand perfectly what is going on. Unless one is awakened to this position of questioning his suffering, unless he realizes that he doesn't want suffering but rather wants to make a solution to all suffering, then one is not to be considered a perfect human being. Parabhavastavad abodhajata yavan jigyasata atmatattvam. One is considered to have failed in his human life if he uh, doesn't inquire about his nature. Why am I? Uh, why do I have to undergo this? Just like if, let us say, tomorrow morning you wake up, and when you wake up, it's all dark. You check whether you're dreaming or not. You pinch yourself, and it actually pains. And somebody next to you says, "You are not dreaming," and I'll prove that you're not dreaming. I'm standing next to you. I'm going to pinch you, and it will pain. And he pinches you. You're convinced it's not a dream. It's all dark. It's cold. You're feeling very uncomfortable. You want to get up, you cannot get up. Your hands are tied. Your legs are also tied. So then you ask this person, what is this and why am I bound like this? Who are you? What do you want from me? And so on. Did you tie me? Why did you tie me? This is natural. Every rational person wants to understand why he is forced to experience something undesirable, or even when his desires are not fulfilled. There is going after that which is desirable and being prevented from that. And there is the other situation of being forced to experience the undesirable. It is a sign of rationality when you begin to inquire why these restrictions are imposed upon you. So anybody who is a rational person will inquire. He will not simply think, oh, whatever it may be, let me just go on with the party and just enjoy as much as possible until I die. What happens after death? Why are we supposed to die anyway? Saying that it's natural means nothing. It's just another way of saying I don't know. Humanity begins when this sort of inquiry is awakened in one's mind. In the Brahma Sutra, this inquiry is called Brahma Jigyasa, Atatho Brahma Jigyasa. Every activity of the human being is to be considered a failure unless he inquires about the nature of the Absolute. This is that Bhagavatam verse which I quoted. Parabhavastava dabodhajato yavanna jigyasata atmatattvam. Therefore, those who begin to question why they are suffering or where they came from and where they shall go after death are proper students for understanding Bhagavad Gita. So this is uh, a qualification. In addition to being a devotee of the Supreme Lord, in addition to uh, being a servant of the Supreme Lord voluntarily, one must also be inquisitive to understand the nature of this world and so on. The sincere student should also have firm respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shraddhalu must have firm faith. Such a student was Arjuna. Lord Krishna descends specifically to re-establish the real purpose of life when man forgets that purpose. Even then, out of many, many human beings who awaken, there may be one who actually enters the spirit of understanding his position, and for him this Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Notice this. First of all, there are so many human beings. All living creatures suffer, human beings also suffer. But out of them, there are only some who actually begin questioning, begin wondering, what is the background cause for my undesirable existence now. Now, amongst many such persons who question in this way, there may be one who actually accepts the Bhagavad Gita the way it is meant to be accepted. In other words, who accepts it exactly as how Arjuna accepted it. Shishyasteham sadhimam tvam prapanna param brahma param dhama pavitram paramam bhava. Who actually accepts Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He may not know in detail the glorious position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and so on. But he knows that he accepts that Krishna is an authority, he is the highest authority, and the statements of Bhagavad Gita are true. So for such a person, Lord Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita. Now one may ask, no, Bhagavad Gita is being spoken. Bhagavad Gita is being spoken in the open. Krishna is speaking here for everyone's benefit. How can you say that it is spoken for the one who is inquisitive about the nature of material existence and he has accepted Lord Krishna the way Arjuna has accepted Lord Krishna? How can you say that? Sometimes specific directives are announced in public. For instance, during a festival where thousands of devotees have gathered in one of our centers, after Mangalarati, there may be an announcement like this. There will be a parikrama to Jagannath Mandir in Simant Dweep today. The bus will leave at such and such a time. Those of you who have registered for it, please assemble at such and such a spot with your bands as proof that you have registered for it. Now this is an announcement made after Mangalarati in front of thousands of devotees. Hundreds are directly present, physically present there, and so many others are hearing through speakers or on the internet and so on. But actually it is not meant for everyone. It is only meant for a small group of people. Those who have registered for that parikrama to Jagannath Mandir at Simanta Dweep. Those who have registered. It is only for these people. It's small. It's only for some maybe 30-40 people. That's all. Yet it is made in public. So the target audience should be clearly understood. We should clearly understand who the target audience is. The target audience for Bhagavad Gita are these people, those who are Krishna Bhaktas and who want to get out of the sufferings of material existence and who are inquisitive to understand the factual nature of material existence itself so that they can get out. Actually, we are all swallowed by the tigress of nescience. Nescience means ignorance. But the Lord is very merciful upon living entities, especially human beings. To this end, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, making his friend Arjuna his student. Being an associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna was above all ignorance, but Arjuna was put into ignorance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to question Lord Krishna about the problems of life so that the Lord could explain them for the benefit of future generations of human beings and chalk out the plan of life. Then man could act accordingly and perfect the mission of human life. In other words, we should plan out our life in such a manner that we progress from lower stages of Krishna consciousness to higher stages of Krishna consciousness, and we fulfill the mission of human life. Prabhupada often talks about the mission of human life. Human life is meant to achieve certain goals. Transcendentalists and those in the mode of goodness and even those in the mode of passion are all goal oriented, result oriented. Only in Tamoguna, people are not goal oriented or result oriented. So we are meant to perfect the mission of human life, which is to attain spiritual goals. Sadhana siddhi has to be attained. We don't depend on attainment of kripa siddhi. Kripa siddhi may come. If it comes, it's good. We'll take it as a bonus. But sadhana siddhi is meant to be achieved. This is clear from the prayers of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The subject of the Bhagavad Gita entails the comprehension of 5 basic truths. First of all, the signs of God is explained, and then the constitutional position of the living entities, the jivas. There is Ishvara, which means the controller, and there are jivas, the living entities who are controlled. If a living entity says that he is not controlled but that he is free, then he is insane. The living being is controlled in every respect, at least in his conditioned life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter deals with the Ishvara, the supreme controller, and the jivas, the controlled living entities. Prakriti, material nature, and time, the duration of existence of the whole universe or the manifestation of material nature, and karma, activity, are also discussed. The cosmic manifestation is full of different activities. All living entities are engaged in different activities. From Bhagavad Gita, we must learn what God is, what the living entities are, what Prakriti is, what the cosmic manifestation is, how it is controlled by time, and what the activities of the living entities are. Out of these 5 basic subject matters in Bhagavad Gita, it is established that the Supreme Godhead, or Krishna, or Brahman, or the Supreme Controller, or Paramatma, you may use whatever name you like, is the greatest of all. The living beings are in quality like the Supreme Controller. For instance, the Lord has control over the universal affairs of material nature, as will be explained in the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Material nature is not independent. She is acting under the directions of the Supreme Lord. As Lord Krishna says, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate satcharachara. This material nature is working under my direction. When we see wonderful things happening in the cosmic nature, we should know that behind this cosmic manifestation there is a controller. Nothing could be manifested without being controlled. It is childish not to consider the controller. For instance, a child may think that an automobile is quite wonderful to be able to run without a horse or other animal pulling it. But a sane man knows the nature of the automobile's engineering arrangement. He always knows that behind the machinery there is a man, a driver. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the driver under whose direction everything is working. So the Supreme Lord is the driver, is the controller. Now, the jivas, or the living entities, have been accepted by the Lord, as we will note in the later chapters, as his parts and parcels. Mamevamsho jivaloke jivabhuta sanatanaha. Amsha. A particle of gold is also gold. A drop of water from the ocean is also salty. And similarly, we, the living entities, being part and parcel of the Supreme Controller, Ishvara or Bhagavan, Lord Shri Krishna, have all the qualities of the Supreme Lord in minute quantity. Because we are minute Ishwaras, subordinate Ishwaras, we are trying to control nature, as presently we are trying to control space or planets. And this tendency to control is there because it is in Krishna. But although we have a tendency to lord it over material nature, we should know that we are not the supreme controller. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. So we are not the supreme controller. We have a tendency to control. You can say we are minutely potential controllers. But we are not factually the supreme controller. That is clear from various statements in Bhagavad Gita. What is material nature? This is also explained in Gita as inferior Prakriti, inferior nature. The living entity is explained as the superior Prakriti, superior nature. Prakriti, nature, is always under control, whether inferior or superior. Prakriti is female and she is controlled by the Lord just as the activities of a wife are controlled by the husband. Prakriti is always subordinate, predominated by the Lord who is the predominator. The living entities and material nature are both predominated, controlled by the Supreme Lord. According to the Gita, the living entities, although parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are to be considered Prakriti. So we are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is Purusha, but we are not Purusha actually. We are Prakriti. This is clearly mentioned in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Apareyam itaspanyam prakritim vidhime param jiva bhutam. This material nature is my inferior Prakriti, but beyond this is another Prakriti, jiva bhutam, the living entity. Sometimes the living entity is referred to as Purusha. We will see that 13th chapter. But we should still understand that the living entities are not Parama Purusha. They are not Parama Purusha. They are not Parama Purushas. They can never ever become the Parama Purusha. They are always Prakriti by nature. But because they are trying to imitate the Parama Purusha, they are referred to as Purushas sometimes. They're trying to lord it over material nature. Material nature itself is constituted by 3 qualities: the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Above these modes, there is eternal time. It means eternal time is not constituted of the 3 modes. It is above. Whereas material nature itself is constituted by the 3 qualities. That's the distinction between time and material nature. Time is also material, as we saw in Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu's commentary. And by a combination of these modes of nature and under the control and purview of eternal time, there are activities which are called karma. Karma refers to material activities. These activities are being carried out from time immemorial, and we are suffering or enjoying the fruits of our activities. For instance, suppose I am a businessman and I work very hard with intelligence and I've amassed a great bank balance. Then I am an enjoyer. But then say I have lost all my money in business. Then I am a sufferer. Similarly, in every field of life, we enjoy the results of our work or we suffer the results. This is called karma. One may wonder what is so big about this that this needs to be discussed. We all know I work hard and I become rich. So then what is the need to analyze this subject matter at all? It becomes very important because just as within one lifetime we engage in certain activities and we receive the results of those activities, and that is very much perceived by our senses. We perceive it. Somebody studies, sits for the exam, gets good marks. Very much perceivable. Another person, same class, does not study and writes the exam very badly, gets low marks. Pratyaksha Siddha. Anybody can verify through sense perception. This much is known. But what about over the lifetimes? That is called karma. Karma refers to actions and reactions over the lifetimes. We know very well, simply through our own pratyaksha and anumana, very obvious that we engage in certain activities, we experience happiness. We engage in certain other activities, we experience unhappiness. I'm very hungry, I eat, my hunger goes away. Simple principle, we know this and we take advantage of this principle. However, from the Vedic scriptures, we understand things which are more than that. We understand that the material happiness or unhappiness that comes to us unsought for are actually effects of certain activities which are considered favorable or unfavorable by the Vedic scriptures. Activities that are in line with the directives of the Vedic scriptures are called dharma, Veda pranihito dharma, and activities which are in opposition to them are called adharma. Hyadharmastad viparyaya, 6th canto, Bhagavatam. So when we engage in certain activities which are in line with Vedic dharma, the law of God as taught by the Vedas, then we get what is known as pious credits. And we engage in sinful activities, activities which are opposed to Vedic dharma are called sinful activities. Then we attain what are called sinful reactions. You can say it is some kind of impious credit. Basically, you get a plus point or a minus point. If you get plus points in your next life, you will attain certain benefits. Janma, Ishwarya, Shuta, Shri, and so on, many. That is noted in the Vedic scriptures, how you get benefited. And if you engage in sinful activities, you get minus points. So in your next life, you will be deprived of those benefits, or you will be subjected to various forms of suffering. This happens over the lifetime. Over the lifetimes, sometimes. There are certain activities, pious activities, if I engage in, I get to enjoy for several lifetimes. I have earned it. I have reserved it. I have booked it. It's like we book flight tickets ahead of time. We pay for it. When you go into the flight, you sit in business class if you paid for business class, and so on. And when you engage in sinful activities, you will suffer. So this cause and effect of material happiness and unhappiness with activities of Vedic dharma and adharma over the lifetimes is what is referred to as the law of karma. So this is also presented in Bhagavad Gita. Actually, these five subject matters are standard Vedic teachings. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana Prabhu explains it. And certainly they are brought out in Bhagavad Gita also. Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Jiva, the living entity, Prakriti, nature, Kala, eternal time, and karma, activity are all explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Out of these five, the Lord, the living entities, material nature, and time are eternal. The manifestation of Prakriti may be temporary, but it is not false. Some philosophers say that the manifestation of material nature is false, but according to the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita or according to the philosophy of the Vaishnavas, this is not so. The manifestation of the world is not accepted as false. It is accepted as real but temporary. It is likened unto a cloud which moves across the sky, or the coming of the rainy season which nourishes grains. As soon as the rainy season is over, and as soon as the cloud goes away, all the crops which are nourished by the rain dry up. Similarly, this material manifestation takes place at a certain interval, stays for a while, and then disappears. Such are the workings of Prakriti. But this cycle is working eternally. Therefore, Prakriti is eternal. It is not false. The Lord refers to this as my Prakriti. In other words, if He is eternal, then His possessions are also eternal. And since Prakriti is one of His possessions, that is also eternal. Material nature is eternal, but the material manifestations are temporary. It's like in a cinema theater. You have the projector which projects a cinema for a certain audience. If the audience were not to be there, there would be no cinema projector, there would be no cinema that is being projected there, and there would be no cinema hall also. This itself indicates that it is designed for the audience. Similarly, this entire material manifestation that we see, this material creation, is designed for the living entities. Material manifestations are temporary. How it is so will be explained when we come across a description of Brahma's life. In Bhagavad Gita, most of these subject matters are summarized, and in Srimad Bhagavatam they are very beautifully elaborated upon. The cinema theater is, you can say, a permanent structure, but different movies are shown at different times. It's not that a particular movie is going to be shown every day for everlasting time. Similarly, material manifestations are shown and not shown. Sometimes the show is on, sometimes the show is not on. So therefore, in order to understand that, in order to help us understand that material nature is not permanent, sometimes the Vedic scriptures say that it is not real. When it says it is not real, what it means is don't mistake it for something that which is permanent. This material nature is a separated energy of the Supreme Lord, and similarly the living entities are also the energy of the Supreme Lord, although they are not separated but eternally related. So the Lord, the living entity, material nature and time are all interrelated and are all eternal. However, the other item, karma, is not eternal. The effects of karma may be very old indeed. We are suffering or enjoying the results of our activities from time immemorial. But we can change the results of our karma or our activity, and this change depends on the perfection of our knowledge. We are engaged in various activities. Undoubtedly, we do not know what sort of activities we should adopt to gain relief from the actions and reactions of all these activities. But this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita. So karma can be changed, but that is dependent on the perfection of our knowledge. It depends on how much we know or how deeply we know. There is knowledge, there is understanding, there is a realization. So that depth of knowledge is an important consideration in Vedic civilization. The position of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is that of supreme consciousness. The living entities or the jivas or the living entities, being parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also conscious. Both the living entity and material nature are explained as Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord, but one of the two, the jiva, is conscious. The other Prakriti is not conscious. That is the difference. Therefore, the jiva Prakriti is called superior, because the jiva has consciousness which is similar to the Lord's. The Lord's is supreme consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. In other words, between Ishvara, Jiva and Prakriti, the common feature of Jiva and Prakriti are that both of them are subject to the control of Ishvara. Ishvara is independent. In other words, Ishvara is independent and the Jivas are dependent on Ishvara. Prakriti is also dependent on Ishvara. From another perspective, Ishvara is conscious. The Jivas are also conscious, but Prakriti is not conscious. Prakriti is not conscious. Kala is not conscious. Karma is not conscious also. Karma is just it is a subtle entity. It is say it is something like it is like a subtle account. It's a currency which it is an inter-lifetime currency. It is a currency which can be used over the lifetimes, you can say. Not just currency, because you may get plus points, you may get minus points also. It is a way of keeping track of each living entity. Anushaya, everyone's got his own karmic account which is attached to him. He is tagged with that. And he will experience his particular karmic reactions. Jivo gacchati ekaha. When we die, nobody is going to accompany us. Not the wife, not the children, not father, mother, and so on. We will leave alone. We entered into this world alone. We will leave this world alone also. When we go away, then our karmic reactions will follow us. But karmic reactions are not conscious. Ishvara and the Jivas are conscious. What is consciousness? We will see that a little later. But right now, it should be understood that the Supreme Lord and the Jiva both have consciousness. The Jiva's consciousness is similar to the Lord's consciousness. Qualitatively one, but quantitatively not one. The Supreme Lord is conscious of everything at the same time. But the living entity is not conscious of everything at the same time. It cannot even be. It cannot. He is by design limited, if you want to put it that way. The Lord's is supreme consciousness, however, and one should not claim that the Jiva, the living entity, is also supremely conscious. The living being cannot be supremely conscious at any stage of his perfection, and the theory that he can be so is a misleading theory. Conscious he may be, but he is not perfectly or supremely conscious. He cannot ever become omniscient like the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the fullest sense. The distinction between the Jiva and the Ishvara will be explained in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. There, Lord Krishna points out that there is a distinction between Ekakshetragya and Sarvakshetragya. In Krishna, he points out that he is not Ekakshetragya. He is not aware of only his field of activity, his particular body. He is aware of all the bodies as a super soul. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramithyavideyate etad yo vetti tam prahu kshetragya iti tadvidha. the one who is conscious of the body. See, the body is not conscious of itself, but there is something which is conscious of the body. So that is the conscious entity. The Supreme Lord is also a conscious entity, but he is conscious of all the bodies of everyone in material existence, whereas the Jivatma is only conscious of the body in which he resides. The Lord is Kshetragya, conscious, as is the living being, but the living being is conscious of his particular body, whereas the Lord is conscious of all bodies. Because he lives in the heart of every living being, he is conscious of the psychic movements of the particular jivas. Psychic movement. The living entities, they think in various ways. These thoughts are referred to by Prabhupada as psychic movements. We should not forget this. So we should not forget that Krishna is conscious of the living entities' various endeavors. All the living entities' various endeavors. It is also explained that the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is living in everyone's heart as Ishvara, as a controller, and that he is giving directions for the living entity to act as it desires. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridesher janatishthati bhramayan sarvabhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. The living entity forgets what to do. First of all, he makes a determination to act in a certain way, and then he is entangled in the actions and reactions of his own karma. After giving up one type of body, he enters another type of body as we take off and put on clothes. As the soul thus migrates, he suffers the actions and reactions of his past activities. These activities can be changed when the living entity is in the mode of goodness, in sanity, and understands what sort of activities he should adopt. So, why does the Supreme Lord give directions to the living entity to act as he desires? Because the living entity forgets what to do. Matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. The Supreme Lord has to inspire us to engage in activities that we have ourselves forgotten to resume. The Supreme Lord is the one as the Paramatma, Upadrashta and Anumanta. He gives this remembrance repeatedly. More about this later. If he does so, then all the actions and reactions of his past activities can be changed. So again, you see, karma refers to activities which produce results in the next life, at least one lifetime. There are some extraordinary pious activities and extraordinary sinful activities for which the results are attained in this very life. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Shikshamrita points out that aparadha, offenses, are the worst of sinful activities because they are directed at the Supreme Personality of Godhead or those who are directly related to him. Parama Papa, we can say, supreme sinful activities. So the reactions for offenses are obtained in one very lifetime. Similarly, the highest form of pious activity is actually Bhagavata Dharma, the activities of bhakti, and the results can be seen in one very lifetime. Of course, I will admit there is Avantara Phala and Charama Phala. There is the ultimate result and there are interim results. Interim results are experienced in this lifetime, whereas the ultimate results are experienced much later. You can say that even for pious activities, there are always some interim results that can be experienced in this lifetime, but that also depends on one's karmic queue. It depends on the karmic reaction queue, actually. What all karmic reactions he has to face in this lifetime because of the positive or negative activities he has engaged in the previous lifetimes. Previous lifetime or lifetimes. So it is quite complicated. It's quite complicated. Karmic reactions may go for several lifetimes also. Not easy to materially get out of it. Therefore, we should engage in those specific activities by which we can become freed from the bondage due to our karmic reactions. Bhagavad Gita gives us some pointers. Srimad Bhagavatam explains them more clearly. And Chaitanya Charitamrita explains them perfectly, with absolute clarity. If he does so, then all the actions and reactions of his past activities can be changed. Consequently, karma is not eternal. Therefore, we stated that of the five items, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, time and karma, four are eternal, whereas karma is not eternal. The Supreme Conscious Ishvara is similar to the living entity in this way. Both the consciousness of the Lord and that of the living entity are transcendental. It is not that consciousness is generated by the association of matter. That is a mistaken idea. The theory that consciousness develops under certain circumstances of material combination is not accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. Consciousness may be pervertedly reflected by the covering of material circumstances, just as light reflected through colored glass may appear to be a certain color. But the consciousness of the Lord is not materially affected. Lord Krishna says, Maya Dhakshena Prakriti. When he descends into the material universe, his consciousness is not materially affected. If he were so affected, he would be unfit to speak on transcendental matters as he does in the Bhagavad Gita. One cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from materially contaminated consciousness. So the Lord is not materially contaminated. Our consciousness at the present moment, however, is materially contaminated. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that we have to purify this materially contaminated consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be dovetailed to the will of Ishvara, and that will make us happy. This is clear from chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita. After he concludes his teaching, he asks Arjuna, is everything clear? Do I need to re-explain anything? He brings out that point to Arjuna. And then Arjuna says, Nashto moha, my delusions are gone. Smritir labdha, my memory has come back. Tat prasadan my achyuta, stosme gata sandeha. I have no doubts by your mercy. Karishye vachanam tava, I will do what you order. So from that verse, we ourselves understand that that is a state of pure consciousness, because Arjuna is telling very clearly that his moha, delusion is gone and so on. If Arjuna would be deluded while saying that, Lord Krishna would have immediately stopped him and he would have spoken and clarified things further to make Arjuna understand that no, you are still deluded even though you are thinking you are. He would have chastised him like he has chastised him in the second chapter and so on. The very fact that Lord Krishna has accepted Arjuna's statements indicates that he is approving of Arjuna's statements. So from that we understand that that itself is an indication that Arjuna's state of consciousness is pure. So that is pure consciousness. And there we see that Arjuna's activities, he wants to dovetail them to the will of Lord Krishna. So that is what Prabhupada brings up here. Our actions will be dovetailed to the will of Ishvara in pure consciousness. And that will make us happy. Just as Arjuna became happy. It is not that we have to cease all activities. Rather, our activities are to be purified, and purified activities are called bhakti. Activities in bhakti appear to be like ordinary activities, but they are not contaminated. An ignorant person may see that a devotee is acting or working like an ordinary man. But such a person with a poor fund of knowledge does not know that the activities of the devotee or of the Lord are not contaminated by impure consciousness or matter. They are transcendental to the three modes of nature. We should know, however, that at this point, our consciousness is contaminated. When we are materially contaminated, we are called conditioned, baddha, conditioned, placed under certain restrictions. False consciousness is exhibited under the impression that I am a product of material nature. This is called false ego. One who is absorbed in the thought of bodily conceptions cannot understand this situation. Bhagavad Gita was spoken to liberate one from the bodily conception of life. And Arjuna put himself in this position in order to receive this information from the Lord. One must become free from the bodily conception of life. That is the preliminary activity for the transcendentalist. Transcendentalist. One who is aspiring to attain Brahman realization or Paramatma realization or Bhagwan realization. Bhaktas are first class transcendentalists, they want Bhagwan realization. Yogis are second class transcendentalists, they want Paramatma realization. Jnanis are interested in Brahman realization, third class transcendentalists. One who wants to become free, who wants to become liberated, must first of all learn that he is not this material body. Mukti or liberation means freedom from material consciousness. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also the definition of liberation is given. Mukti hritvanyatharupa swarupena vyavastiti. Mukti means liberation from the contaminated consciousness of this material world and situation in pure consciousness. So being situated in pure consciousness is called liberation. In Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, all the instructions of Bhagavad Gita are intended to awaken this pure consciousness. And therefore we find at the last stage of the Gita's instructions that Krishna is asking Arjuna whether he is now in purified consciousness. Purified consciousness means acting in accordance with the instructions of the Lord. This is the whole sum and substance of purified consciousness. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do what you say. I will obey the Supreme Lord. Now, obedience to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is dharma, samanya dharma actually. It is just ordinary Vedic dharma. So how can you say that obedience to the Supreme Lord, like Arjuna's obedience to Krishna at the end of the Gita, is a symptom of purified consciousness, which indicates pure bhakti, which is the highest rung of Vedic dharma? It can be answered in this way. Obedience to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for any purpose can be accepted as dharma. There are various purposes for which one may be fully obedient to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One may be interested in bhakti, one may be interested in mukti, one may be interested in pleasing the Supreme Lord. Various reasons are there. One could be akama, one could be sarvakama, one could be mokshakama, as we learn from the second canto of Bhagavatam. But here Prabhupada is talking about the status of pure consciousness, where one simply wants to carry out the injunctions of the Supreme Lord exclusively to please Him, with no desire for material happiness or freedom from material unhappiness. That is what Arjuna is referring to when he says, I will do whatever you say. So that is pure consciousness, purified consciousness. Consciousness is already there because we are part and parcel of the Lord, but for us there is the affinity of being affected by the inferior modes. But the Lord, being the Supreme, is never affected. That is the difference between the Supreme Lord and the small individual souls. This is the point that comes out in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation of the difference between Ishvara and the Jivas. Comes in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Supreme Lord is Mayadhish and the living entities are Mayavasha. The living entities have the affinity of being affected by the inferior modes. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself explains, the living entity constitutionally has this particular nature. Sajiva, muktopi, prakriti vasha yogyaha, swagunataha. Intrinsically, all living entities, whether conditioned, liberated, whatever, all living entities, Tatastha Shakti is a member of the Tatastha Shakti group, has this intrinsic feature. Sajiva, muktopi prakriti vasha yogya. Even if he attains the highest form of liberation, he is capable of coming under Prakriti, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never ever capable of coming under material nature. Whereas the individual living entities, the Jivatmas, are always capable of coming under Prakriti, material Prakriti. If they are interested in serving the Supreme Lord, they are placed under Yogamaya. If they turn away from the Supreme Lord, they are placed under Mahamaya. That is the difference between the Supreme Lord and the small individual souls. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpadurvyasya Pasandakyavacha Patipanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.